Snapshot 25W20A brought us Data Pack version 77 and Resource Pack version 61 with custom UI modal dialogues and more. My name is Sliced Lime and this is a guide to the changes. Let's start with Dialogs. This is a new type of custom user interface for data packs and custom servers, based on a new experimental registry of Dialog Content, which can also be specified inline in the new Dialog command. Dialogs are simple modals, that is, they take over the input for the screen until they are dismissed. They're meant to provide a custom way to describe simple user interface, rather than a way to create any user interface in the game. As such, the feature is intentionally limited to match that use case. To avoid users mixing them up with the actual game user interface, dialog screens are marked with a warning sign next to their titles. Clicking on that warning leads to a screen explaining that what you're seeing is custom content, and it also gives the user a way to exit the world if they've become locked in a loop of dialogues. For custom servers, dialogs are available already in the configuration phase, which is generally during the connecting loading screen. However, at that point all dialogs have to be specified inline since registries have not finished loading. There are a number of ways to display dialogs, including from the pause menu and using the new dialog command. Either way, a dialog pauses the game in single player and can then be closed by pressing escape or by pressing any of the buttons on the screen. Closing the dialog, regardless of how, will cause the user to go back to whatever their last open screen was. The new dialog command can be used to show or hide the dialogs. Dialog show is followed by the player targets and the dialog, either as a namespaced ID of the dialog in a data pack or the inline data of the dialog itself. And dialog clear will close any visible dialogs for the given target. Another way to show dialogs is through the pause menu. This replaces the previous server links feature and the new button is placed according to the same rules. The label for a dialog button in the pause menu is specified in its external title field, and it shows up depending on the pause screen additions dialog tag. If that tag has a single element, that button will now show instead of the send feedback and report bugs buttons. If it has multiple elements, the pause screen will have a button that leads to the Minecraft: custom options dialog, which by default lets you select one of the tag elements. So what are dialogs? Most dialogs follow a common layout, but the exact contents depends on which type it is, and we'll look at all the types in a moment. The general layout starts with a header with the title and the warning button. That's followed by the body elements, which are things like labels, input boxes, buttons, and so on, which will be scrollable if it's too long to fit. And then finally, there may or may not be a footer, which contains buttons and submit actions. The various types of dialogs have a type field that determines which other fields they have, but there are some common fields that are common between most types. They are the title field, which is a text component which is always visible on screen. The external title field, which is the name of any button that displays the dialog, also in form of a text component. Can close with escape is an optional Boolean which does what it says on the tin, with a default value of true. When a dialog is closed this way, an exit action is also triggered, which depends on the type of dialog. And the body field is a body element or list of body elements making up the dialog. Think of this as the text that is displayed before anything else in the body. Although it can be made up of multiple instances of body types, which can currently be text messages and items. The plain message body type shows a multi-line message. It has a contents field for the contents, which is a text component, and a width field that limits the maximum width of the message, with a default of 200. The other body type is the item type, which is an item with an optional description. The item is rendered as if it was in an inventory slot. Which item to draw is set in the item field, and how it is shown is controlled by the show decorations boolean, which determines whether the stack count and damage bars should show, with true as the default. The show tooltip field controls whether a tooltip should show if the item is hovered, also with a default of true. The description field is either a text component to show next to the item or an object in the plain message body type format with contents and width fields. And finally, the item type also has width and height fields with a default of 16, but changing these does not scale the item, only the display area for it. Let's get into the dialog types. The notice dialog type shows a message and has a single action in the footer. This action is specified in an action field, or a simple OK button if none is specified. The action can be specified as an object with a label field for the text component shown on the button. The width field sets the width of the button with a default of 150. And the tooltip field can contain a text component to display whenever the button has a keyboard highlight or is hovered. The onClick field has a click event, which is the same format as click event actions in text components. The exit action for a notice dialog is the same as the action field. The confirmation dialog type shows a message in the body and has two actions in the footer. These actions have the same click action format as for the notice action and are set in a yes and a no field. The exit action for a confirmation dialog is the no action. A multi-action dialog shows a scrollable list of actions arranged in columns. It also has a footer with a cancel or back button. The actions field is a list of at least one click action, which will be arranged in a number of columns specified in the columns field. The onCancel field is an optional click event like a click event on a text component. The exit action is whatever is defined in that click event, and the label of the button will be cancel if onCancel is defined and back otherwise. The server links dialog type shows a list of links received from the server arranged in columns. The screen has the same columns and onCancel field as the multi-action type, but instead of actions, this dialog type has a button width field that determines the width of all the buttons. Dialog list dialogs show a list of buttons that lead to other dialogs arranged in columns. The title of each button is determined by the external title field of those dialogs. Like the previous one, this dialog type also has onCancel, columns, and button width fields, and in addition it also has a dialogs field, which is a dialog, list of dialogs, or hash prefix dialog tag. Simple input form dialog types present screens that ask for some form of user input. It has an inputs field, which is a non-empty list of input controls, and an action field, which is a submit action that happens when the button is clicked. To get into the details of these, we'll need to look at both the input controls and the submit actions. Each input control has a key which is used when the data is submitted. This must be a valid macro argument form, which means made up of letters, digits, and underscore characters. Each input control also has a type field which specifies what type it is and thereby also what other fields it has. Text input controls ask for whatever text the player wants to input, which is then submitted without modification. They have width fields, which is the width of the input field, or by default 200. The label field is a text component to show us a label in front of the control. Label visible is a boolean that controls whether the label should be shown, by default true. And initial contains a string describing what should show in the input field when the dialog is shown. The boolean input type shows a checkbox. It also has a label field for the text displayed to the right, and an initial field for the initial value, which in this case is a boolean. The onTrue and onFalse string fields contain what value to submit, which defaults to the string forms of true and false. The single option input type shows a button that cycles between options when clicked, and submits the selected value. It has label, label visible, and width fields just like the text type, but instead of displaying the label separately, it is displayed on the button as a prefix. The options field contains a list of options, where each option has an ID field with the string to send if that option is selected when submitting. The display field contains a text component to display. If the display is not set, the ID is used instead. Options can also have an initial boolean, which flags which option to show by default. Only one option can have that set to true. There's also a simple format of options represented as strings, in which case that string is both the ID and the display. And finally, the number range input type is a slider for picking a number in some range, which then submits the selected value. If it's a whole number, it will be sent without a decimal point. It has a label text component field for the slider label, but also a label format field which specifies a translation key, which is used when composing the final content. The first argument to this translation string is the label, the second is the value. And the default key is options.generic_value. The width field sets the width of the slider, which by default is 200. Start sets the leftmost possible value and end sets the rightmost possible value. which can then be moved between in an increment determined by the steps field, which sets how many notches the slider will have from the start point. A value of 1 means the slider only has a leftmost and a rightmost setting. A value of 2 means there's one more in the middle, and so on. The initial field has the initial value of the slider rounded down to the nearest step. This value must be in range and defaults to the minimum value if not set. The submit action has a button associated with it, and when that button is clicked, all the values of the inputs will be collected and sent to the server using a method that is determined by the submit method. The command template method builds a command using a provided macro template specified in the template field, and requests the server to run it in the same way as a run command click event would run from a text component. If that resulting command needs elevated permissions, a confirmation box will show before running the command. The available macro parameters are the IDs of all input controls, which will expand to the resulting input value from that control. The custom template submit method sends a custom packet to the server using an ID from the ID field and with contents from a template field that is expanded the same way. This is intended as an alternative to commands for custom servers and does nothing on vanilla servers. And finally, the custom form method also sends a custom server packet, but instead of building the contents from a template, it will send an automatically built format. The only field for this submit method is an ID. There's one more dialog type, the multi-action input form type. It is a more complex version of input forms which has no footer, and instead the submit actions are appended directly to the body. Instead of a single action field, it has an actions field, which is a non-empty list of submit actions, which otherwise work the same as for the simple input form type. And that's all for the dialogs, but there are related changes to text components as well. To begin with, there's a new custom click event, which sends a custom click action packet to the server, which, like mentioned before, has no functionality on vanilla servers. The fields for this click event are ID and payload. There's also a new show dialog click event, which opens a dialog specified in the dialog field when the player clicks on that text component. A change to run command click events as well. Like for dialogs, if the command requires elevated permissions to run, the user will now see a confirmation screen before the command is run. Let's move on to item components. The equipable component has two new fields, a can be sheared boolean and a shearing sound event ID. In attribute news, ghasts and happy ghasts now have the flying speed attribute that modifies their flying speed. And finally, in resource pack news, there are new user interface sprites, icon/music notes for the dancing notes, and toast/now playing for the toast background. And that's it for these pack versions. Thank you for watching. If you've appreciated this monologue about dialogs, then please submit the click action in the footer of the video labeled like. My name is Sliced Lime, and I'll see you next time.